Okay, my real name is Rachel Carter, but I go as BlackAsia Seoul. Um, my name is also unique as well too because it puts both sides together. So Black Asia and then Seoul. So Seoul is spelled as like Seoul, Korea, where I was born. So that's why my name is BlackAsia Seoul. So I was born in Seoul, Korea. I was born to a Korean mother and a Black father, and of course, that's from the military. So you know, growing up biracial in the element that I am as being Korean and Black, I really think that it's a very difficult race growing up in today's society because a lot of people talk about other races, Black and white, and um, Hispanic and Black. But when it comes to Asian and Black, it's very difficult trying to live both sides when you're raised both ways. My mother was basically Buddhism and my father was Christian. So I could just imagine those family dynamics trying to come together and the beliefs that we have. So I was in Seoul, Korea till I think about maybe 6 or 7, but we traveled to different countries like Germany. We've been to the States back and forth, but I've been to a lot of countries and I don't too much remember how it was when I was little, but I do know some of the parts that stick with me. So I know a lot of things are not always beautiful and a lot of things are not always sad, but I do always remember that difficult part that I had when I was growing up. So in different places that we were, I'm not saying that my family was the only Black and Asian person um, in, in the United States, but I can just tell you my experience and how it was living in different part of the country, being both race, because I know a lot of times from certain aspects, from certain people, they always ask me to choose. And that's where life became difficult for me because wherever I was in that setting, I had to be that person. So when I hung around my mom's family, I had to act like I was Korean customs, Korean respect, the tradition. And then when I was around my African American people, it was more like, okay, choose who you're going to be with. You're going to put those traditions in, or are you going to put the traditions that we're teaching you in? I mean, it was really difficult growing up. So I realized like growing up, I have a lot of African American friends, a lot of African American friends. And I always try, especially when I was like 14, I always wondered like, how come it's so difficult for me to try to reach out to the Asian community? Because I lived in the heart of the Asian community. I lived in Koreatown, in the heart of Koreatown, which was Lawrence and Pulaski in Chicago. So that is Chicago, Chicago's Koreatown. And it was difficult living there, in my childhood, just living there. At that time when we were little, I didn't know what discrimination was. I didn't realize what discrimination was until I got into high school, because at that point, my mother didn't show us that, and my father didn't teach us that. It's just when we went to society, we had our own experience, but we just thought that that's how people were. But now that when I went to high school, I realized that that wasn't the right way. But from 14, I realized like, I'm going to try to reach out to that side of the family, trying to reach out to the Korean side to see if I could see the reason why they treat me like that. Like, is it because the color of my skin, or is it just because they don't know? I don't never like to dive into anything in a negative way. I always try to see the positive in everything. So that's a lot of reasons why I think I study a lot of Buddhism, because it's like you accept everything no matter what it is. And if I don't know what it is, I try to seek out that information to figure out what it really is before I speak on it. But I would like go to some Korean restaurants and stuff. And even though I can pick up on the language, I can understand a little bits and pieces, because even to this day, my mother doesn't speak English fluently. She speaks Korean. So it's kind of hard communicating with her, trying to speak a little broken English, just try to get her to understand certain words, and then her trying to put it into what it is that it really means. But it's a lot of miscommunication. But if I would have went to her and asked questions, I know she would have just said that I was crazy and I don't know what I'm talking about. But I seek that out on my own since I was 14. So through that journey, I realized that they really didn't. This is just only my experience. I just want to disclose that because I don't know, what everybody else experienced, but this is just my experience. So, I don't want to touch anybody's emotional side, but when it comes to my experiences, I would go to me and my sisters. It was 3 or 4 of us all together. So it would be like we're going to stores together, and we would go to the Korean stores, and they would always make us go in one by one. So me and my sisters could never go inside the store all together. It would always be a separation. And sometimes I would see Like my mother used to have a flea market that was next to some of the stores that we went to. And me and my sisters would sit outside. We would see Asian people going in there in groups. So I told my sister, like, hey, maybe they're just starting to let us go in there as groups. So let's try. So we would go and try, and it was always the same thing. We would have to go in separately. But, you know, being 14 and 15 and 16, being raised by my mother, I didn't understand what that meant. I just thought that maybe the store was small and they can only allow one person or two people at a time, even though it was other people. But I never looked at it as a racial problem. I just looked at it as a kid, like that's just what it is, because I wasn't raised on looking at the negative part of people. So, you know, so just growing up in those neighborhoods, I realized sometimes when we would go to Korean restaurants with my mother, I remember they would ask questions like, who are these kids? And when my mother would tell them that they're her kids, you can just tell the controversial, the conversations that they're having. And my older sister, who spoke Korean fluently, would say, they're calling us little black girls. And I used to always say we are little black girls. So, you know, before, like I said, when I was younger, we really didn't know what racism was. So we laughed it off and we just did what we were, but they used to call us dirty. They used to say a lot of things. So by the time I got into high school, when I, you know, took the high school classes, you know, taking my classes, and I realized, like, wow, in the history books, they really talk about true racism. Because I'm gonna tell you honestly, growing up, I didn't like history. I never liked history. I flunked history a lot, and I never wanted to know what it was about. I never paid attention. Even when they started talking about slavery, I used to just thought that was what they did back then. But when I was in high school, to me, it just seems like, okay, now I'm much older, and I have to look at this approach in a different set of eyes. So that's when I started realizing that how racism was an issue. And then I really didn't get into it, even like so as I was saying that, you know, when I was in high school, when I had my first child, I had my first child by African American. And then when I end up getting pregnant by my, you know, with my second child with the same person, I remember talking to my mother about, you know, what it's like to raise kids as a single parent. And my mother told me, like, what is the problem with you guys not dating like Asian men? Like, why is it that you guys are not interested in Asian men? And that's when I was 19 years old. And I told my mother, like, we're not interested in Asian men because that's not the right thing to be interested in, right? And then she said, well, I don't understand why it is. It's not like your mother's not Korean. I said, but it also not like that you dated a Korean man either. But, you know, I was a teenager. So I only explained or asked questions to what I pertain, what I really saw. Like, my mother didn't teach us the right and wrong way of dating people. We really never sat down and talked about dating when it came to our family dynamics. You know, my father was in the military, so he was gone most of the time. And then that forced my mother to work. So we didn't have these family gatherings where we can actually sit down and talk about things that girls talk about with their parents, because my mother couldn't speak that well English. So it's hard to try to, me growing up in the, you know, in the United States and learning English, she didn't want us to learn Korean. So it was really hard to communicate. So those are questions we don't ask our parents, like, what kind of man should I date? You know, you just look at your two parents and you try to find the best qualities that they have and bring it together. And because I really barely saw my mom as much because she worked, because my father was always gone, it was more like when my father come home, he would tell us like these wild stories, and I was just interested. And I used to say, maybe that's because he's a black guy. Maybe that's the reason why. Like, he has all these exciting things going on. My mom, all she did was work. And I used to always say, you know, Asian people, just all they're going to do is just work, 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 work. So, but that was just the family dynamics that I had, because, you know, I was, again, just looking at what I saw, because we couldn't have these conversations with my mom. So it was just more of an assumption. So when I got into, like, in my early 20s, I said to myself, like, man, I really want to see what it's like to date my kind, because it's like, if it wasn't my kind, at least to date the one kind. And, you know, it may seem odd back then, but when I started going to Columbia College, and I started to see just a little diversity, and I'm like, wow, I do see some, you know, little more people like me, like Asian and Black. And, you know, I see a lot more diversity, you know, now that I'm in college. And I'm like, okay, so maybe it's okay for a Black woman to date an Asian man, you know, but I didn't see it that much. I didn't see it that much until Facebook came out. And, you know, when Facebook came out and all these groups that they started having, I'm like, wow, these are the things that I used to think about when I was a child they actually have forums and they actually have pages that talk about this stuff freely. So that's what drew me to start joining in these, you know, pages where there's, you know, Asian men, you know, Black women or Blasians. And so more people that's like me. And I realized like, wow, there's a lot more people that's out there that's like me. There's an actual community. And before growing up, I never knew there was a community. I always thought that we were a small number of mixed people. And I used to be embarrassed because I used to be like, well, every time someone saw us, they used to think that maybe we're war babies, that, you know, my mom was having sex with somebody that was at war. So to me, it was more like an embarrassing image. And, you know, a lot of times I didn't shelter telling people that I was Korean. I used to always go by the word that I'm African-American. I never said that I was Asian and Black until I started college, when I started to see the diversity. Like, it's okay to be different. It's okay to be different. So when Facebook came about and all these pages started coming around, I just, you know, I started clicking on groups that as a child that I used to think about. And when I came across the, you know, Black women, Asian men website, I'm like, wow, even though I'm not fully a Black woman and a full Asian person, but I want to know what it's like for a Black woman to actually date an Asian man. Like, I want to really see it in the raw, because I see it like in commercials, TV. I really wanted to see it in person. And even though I see my mom and dad, I didn't think then that it was love at first sight. So I wanted to see what the dynamics was, two people meeting together on a site, and actually a love relationship blossoms from being different. So that's why I started joining these groups, to see maybe I can find something. I don't know, maybe since this group is that way, then I don't have to introduce myself that much, because there's already a club or an organization where they already know they're talking to Black women. And because I used to think that Asian people only see me as a Black woman, they didn't see me as anything else. You know, I mean, it's just how things are. You just portray to think what somebody is because you're looking at them. But there's so many mixtures of nationalities out here. We really don't know what it is. But I was just glad that I found a group where they actually have a community of a relationship like that. So that's why I joined that group, to really see what it's like to be a Black woman trying to date an Asian man, because the culture is, I'm telling you from living on both sides, I mean, it's a culture shock. And I'm more interested to see what it is that a Black woman and an Asian man can definitely find in each other, when the differences are so far off. It's like on the opposite side of the world. And it's interesting to me, because, you know, I look at my mom and my dad, and even though she doesn't speak English and he doesn't speak that much Korean, how did they make a relationship work where 4 children come out of it and we are the way that we are? But this group was really opening up my my mind to really try to get an understanding of what it is that they're looking for. And I really thought that at one point that, you know, maybe it could be the looks, or maybe it could be that they want to understand the culture. But when I got into this actual group, I thought, hey, this was a really nice group, because it says exactly what it is. So there's perfect, no introduction. And then, and you know, another thing is, you don't have to be shy or embarrassed, because they know what they're looking for and you are that person. But it's just a personality that's now you got to put out there to see if that clicked. Because, you know, when you're in a relationship, attraction is number one. You're not just going to walk up to anybody and just start talking to them, you know, just because you like who they are. You don't even know who they are. You know, first you got to like what you see at first. They got to have something about them that draws you to them, and then the conversation starts. But when it came to like Black women, you know, like as myself, trying to date an Asian man, it just seemed like maybe I wasn't light enough for them. Like, I didn't understand, like, we would go into certain places and sometimes they would smear, and when you talk to them, they would say hi and bye, and then they would just, that was just it. It was so hard to get into that, and, you know, just into that, you know, feeling to be like, okay, I think I feel confident enough to, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't even know how to introduce myself. Because I know from an Asian point of view, because I have Asian family members, and most of the time they don't date as much as other cultures date. You know, like, you know, sometimes you don't see them dating a lot of people. It's like, usually it's systematic. It's, if you don't make it to the 3rd or 4th date, then the relationship, the relationship is redundant. That's how I used to see it. And then you know, when you see that the relationship is not working, then you sit down, you have, you know, a dinner, and you talk about the differences, and then you make your decision if you're going to leave. Right? You know, just to me, it was so mature. But then it was just like, I wanted that. I just thought that, you know, if I put myself out there, maybe I can find somebody. But it was like, they're not really looking my way, because I was really trying to figure out what is it they really see, because they don't know who I am, and a lot of times they don't know that I'm Korean. And I know that because a lot of times when I used to go to Korean restaurants and we would order certain foods, and they were like, "Oh, how do you know that food?" And we're like, "Oh, my mother's Korean," and stuff like that. And they'd be like, "Really?" Oh, then they'll say, "I can tell by the eyes," and stuff like that. But during the time where we're sitting at the restaurant, they don't think you can. I can hear them conversating, saying certain things. Like if we say a food that's not right, they would, you know, kind of sneer on it, like, okay, this is another culture trying to get into our culture, you know. So there was a lot of negativity that stopped me from really openly talking to an Asian person on the outside. Like if I go to the library and I see somebody, like, oh man, like he is really handsome, I wish I could just walk up to him. But I don't think it's the intimidation of what they are, it's just the intimidation of what I think they expect, because I really don't know, because I haven't had that experience growing up. So most of my relationship are usually African American men, but that's why this group was so like important, because it's like introduction is everything in a relationship. So if there's something that you don't have to pretty much say, then you're winning on that. At least you're getting a few points there, because then you don't have to introduce yourself as a Black person. Because usually when you start dating, that's the first thing people ask is, "What are you?" So, you know, that's the difficult part of dating Asian men, is because I don't know what their expectations are, because they don't give me the time and day to actually have a conversation with them.
Yeah,
So
wow. Yeah. That's very interesting. So like which side would you say, like which side I guess like which group or whatever, like, whether it be like Asians or African Americans that you feel more accepted by, and which group do you feel not, like less accepted by, and why?
that's a really good question, because to be honest with you, I really don't think that I get accepted on either side. I think African American sides accept me because they know that I am African American. So, you know, I meet a lot more friends, a lot more African American friends. Um, but I think they just accept me for who I am. But I have a lot of issues sometimes with being that. You know, sometimes I can see I mean, I don't like to use the word jealousy, but I can sometimes see the intimidation, because I am different. I think different. Um, you know, I've noticed just growing up, sometimes the foods that I eat is different. That's another reason why I decided also to want to look into dating an Asian man, because it's so hard to try to find, um, you know, men as an African American descendant that have that diversity when it comes to food. It's like, you know, it's a lot of ones that I've met. I can only say that, you know, they weren't really open to eating the kind of foods that I ate. So that was another reason why I wanted to go towards the Asian side, because I don't have to explain my food, you know. And then sometimes when you're in the mood for certain things, it's because it's how you were raised and the culture that was built in you, that you do a certain things, you eat a certain kind of food, or you cook a certain kind of way, or when you're sick you have to eat certain things. It's like you get tired of explaining things like that, or you get tired of the sneering, or ew, what is that, or that looks gross and that smells gross. Like I wanted to, you know, be in a relationship with somebody who understands that culture. Like that's what we do. We eat kimchi. It's, you know, we sit at the table. We don't sit on chairs. We sit on the floor with our legs crossed. We eat with chopsticks. You know, the way we drink and how we drink and the order of where we drink, and all that mattered. And that all that mattered. So when it comes to a relationship, when it comes to me, that stuff matters to me. So that's why I decided that I want to go towards that way. But I know it's going to be a journey, because it seems so hard. But when you think about what's going on today, where there's a lot of more diversity, you would think it's a little much easier, but it is a little more difficult, because now that you're older and you see what, you know, racism is, or you see what dating like is, you know, you kind of step back. I don't think it's intimidation. It's just the not knowing. It's just the not knowing. So you don't know how to approach them, you know, because sometimes what if they don't speak English, or what if they don't want to be bothered, or You know, I've known one of my friends who tried to speak to an Asian person, and they totally flipped out because, you know, in their culture, they don't, you know, sometimes, you know, as in our culture, like they're not very easily acceptable to things that they don't understand. So if they don't speak English, they get a little reluctant, a little scared. And I think we all are. If we go to a different country and we don't speak their language, we get a little scared because we're like, okay, how am I going to communicate? So that's why I said that, you know, trying to date an Asian man, you know, part of the culture is a part of communication, because there's something that's there that you don't have to explain that much, you know? So, but you know, back to the question about you asking, like, what side am I really mostly accepted by? I would really towards my African American side, because I can't tell you if I really truly do have any full-blooded Asian friends. I mean, I have cousins on my mother's side, but even them, even, you know, they say certain things, you know, my mother and her two sisters, they don't talk because my mother married a Black man. So I don't know that side of the family. And even to this day, they still don't talk. And, you know, my other auntie on my mother's side, Korean side, she dated a Black man because she wanted to come to America. And she, you know, she wanted to have a life here. But, you know, she found him in the military. And that's what she told us, that she got to him and she wanted to come to America. But other than that, even when we were here, still, it was like we were in the Asian community, and I didn't meet any Asian friends. Even the schools that I went to, I didn't have any Asian friends. I didn't meet friends until I was in 6th grade. And that's kind of, to me, you know, late in meeting friends, because you're supposed to have friends when you're in kindergarten. I didn't have any friends from kindergarten to 6th grade. Not only because we moved around, but no matter where we moved up north, we were always in an Asian community because my mother was Asian. We lived with my mother. My father lived out south, so he lived in, you know, Black communities. So, but we barely was going over there because he didn't like us to be over there by ourselves. So we pretty much was with our mother in that area. So when we went to school, we didn't meet any Asian. We don't have any Asian friends, like full, completely, you know, Asian friends. So a lot of my friends are mostly like mixed with something, or Hispanics, or mostly African American descent. So that's why when I got to this age, I'm like, I think I can find the courage, because now I'm much older, and rejection is not as bad as it was back then when we thought that we were all that, and we don't feel like rejection is any. I wish somebody would reject me, because, you know, that's how we feel sometimes. But now that I'm much older and I can read about a lot of things and I can do the approach differently, it seems like it could be a lot easier. But even being in this group, I can see why it is a little difficult. It is really difficult. And it can also become something where people just step back and like, no, I'm not even going to try. I think the outcome of trying is probably more harsher than even just thinking about it, because then you start to get scared. So I think it's more fear than it is anything else. Trying to date, you know, an Asian man. So that's why being on this channel tries to help me loosen up a little bit, just to see what it is that they're thinking. So when you do approach an Asian man, you kind of have a general idea of what it is that they're looking for, because you're reading about it, and, you know, and you're getting all that feedback and information, like, okay, I see where the culture is coming from. But so that's why I'm, you know, join those groups, just to get an understanding on that side, because I don't see it, you know, going outside, like I said, meeting somebody at the library. I don't have that one-on-one interaction with an actual Asian. So that's why being online, just trying to read about them, that's the only closest thing that you actually have. I guess my experience would be like, I would say mostly like, I don't think it's a racial thing, because again, I don't, like, that's the reason why I'm on the channel, because I want to know that side, if that is what it is. Because again, my experience is not, because a lot of times, I'm being honest with you, 90% of the time, I don't think I could let's just give the numbers to make it easier, because I have never met an Asian person that actually said to me that I was mixed with something without me actually expressing that to them. So let's say I go to a Korean restaurant, and let's say, if again we order something, or we say things like 감사합니다, 고마워요, we'll order some certain things in Korean. They're like, oh, how do you know that? And I'll say, oh, my mother is Korean. Oh, okay. And then they'll say, oh, okay. Oh, now I can tell by your eyes. I get that a lot. Now I can tell because of the way that you, because of your eyes. So they'll ask sometimes, like, when we go to a Korean restaurant and I see, Asian guys, serving and stuff like that, you try to speak to them and they just, they say hello and then they, you know, then they go on about their business. You smile at them and they don't look back. So it's, I know sometimes a lot of people would say, well, maybe they're just not attracted to you. I believe that as well too. But sometimes just because you smile at somebody, it doesn't always mean that you're trying to get their number. You're just trying to be friendly just to get a feedback. And that's where I think a lot of people get it mixed up when it comes to relationship. It doesn't necessarily mean like always just dating somebody, but even just in friendship, just trying to get to know who they are. So that's why I'm in a lot of Asian type groups. You know, because I'm just trying to get the understanding of who's in their group, I follow a lot of Asian people. I mean, I follow a lot of Asian people on Facebook, but I'm telling you, Jamie, that I don't see African American people on their pages when I look through them. So sometimes I don't say anything. I just like their status. Every once in a while I'll say something. I'm telling you truthfully, like a couple of times just when I started going on this journey, I'd say probably maybe a month or two ago, I reached out. I said to myself, I'm gonna reach out to some just some Asian people on my Facebook, just talk to them on on the Insta message, just see just how things are going. And I'm telling you, the turnaround and the outcome is pretty much the same as when I'm out there trying to smile at them. Like I'm the type of person, like, I don't want to tell you what I think they're thinking. That's the reason why I go to these forums, to actually get a full understanding of what it is that they're thinking. So that's why when I follow Black and Asian groups, and then I also follow Asian groups, and I also follow, African American groups, I'm just really trying to get a full understanding on what people are thinking when it comes to ethnicity. So when I go to the African American groups, I don't see people posting up foods that I eat. So I said, okay, I go to the Korean community. I see judgment. I was like, yeah, man, I can like that. And I'll comment on something and people say thank you. And then I'll sometimes go in the inbox and like, you know what, do you know how to make certain kind of foods? Like more like a friendly level, because for me, I don't want anybody to think that I'd be online like, oh, just trying to chat away, just trying to find somebody. That's not what I mean when it says relationship. Just even a friendship relationship. Even on some of these apps that I used to open, I never put long-term relationships. Some I do, some I don't. Some of them I just try to see what it is that people are really looking for, because you could just look for a friendship. Because let me tell you, friendship can lead to anything. So that's why I don't generalize what I'm looking for, because you don't want to tell somebody what you're actually looking for. You want to actually sometimes find out if that person is looking for something long-term. But sometimes friendship can be long-term. But if you put long-term, they would think long-term relationship as dating. Sometimes just want friendship. So I have some of those sites where I just say friendship, and it's just a couple of them is just dry, and then a couple of them is, they're not really looking for what you're looking for in a friendship. They're just some other things. But I'm telling you, I've been doing that for, I'd say, meeting the groups, I say that was probably less than maybe 5 years, but actually talking to them and trying to reach out to them would say the last 2 or 3 years. And the results are the same. They'll talk and say something, and I try to peer something, and then it's crickets. It's nothing else. And then I'll say something like, hey, can we be friends? Like, do you live by the mountains, or do you live, like, let me know what your background is, where you live by. I said, I really would like to see what the river looks like in real life, with somebody actually taking a picture versus looking online. None of that, Sometimes I'll see them hiking and I'm like, oh, have you ever heard of this mountain, or have you been over here? Nothing. So sometimes I just think maybe they're thinking that my approach is more like I'm trying to become maybe a girlfriend or boyfriend of theirs. But I always make sure that the person is single, because, I respect relationships. But even with that, it's just, I wasn't getting the feedback. So that's why I said, when I went to the actual page where the, African American woman and Asian men come into the group, those are that big long list of the things that I was telling you about. I can eliminate that. So there's no way where I'm sitting at the table just thinking to myself, like, you know what, I'm not gonna even try this time. Like, I don't want to make nobody uncomfortable. I don't want someone to think that I'm being aggressive. I don't want them to think that I'm really trying to just, oh, I'm looking for a man. Like I just, for the past 3 months, just stopped. Like, it's discouraging sometimes. So that's why and then when I try to go on the website and I try to read about what it is that they're thinking, some of these websites, most of them are not saying anything. So I really don't have a clue. So that's why I don't know what they want. And I don't consider it like a racial thing. Because again, I only learned about racism since when I was in high school. So I really clearly don't understand 100% what it is, but I know the effects that it is because I felt it. But because I'm such a positive person, I don't want to think negative about people if they didn't verbally say that out of their mouth. So that's why I don't go around saying, oh, I don't think they want to talk to me because I'm Black. Sometimes I just think maybe it could be, because what other reasons could it? I can say small words. I'm saying nice things. I'm just, saying little, just small, simple things. I'm not being aggressive. I'm not telling them anything like derogatory. It's just simple. Hi, hello, how's your day? Do you get to see the sunset? Like, I would love to see what the sunset looks like over there. No comment. It'll be a little talk here and there, but then it's just it. But you just can't go in these messages and ask somebody, do you not want to talk to me because I'm Black? Now that's becoming racist, because now I'm making it seem like that's what it is. But I don't know how to approach somebody to see what it is, that what they like and what they don't like, if they don't engage in the conversation. So I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just a lack of them thinking they don't speak really good English, so they don't know how to talk. But I see when they're texting back, it doesn't seem like it's a problem. But again, that's another assumption that I don't want to have. So I just want to get, some communication level going, just so I can see what it is that they thought about me before I, like, oh, what did you think about me at this particular? I can never get to that level. I can never get to that level. So that's why, being on this website was interesting. It's so interesting to me. But again, I still reluctant because I'm still not getting any kind of feedback, like, because I don't know. By experience, as far as like Facebook, I'm telling you that only thing that I can say about Facebook, regardless of what race somebody is that they follow negativity a lot. Like I'm on a lot of Facebook groups, and we try to talk about topics that's very important, just so you can get, because when you talk about topics, whoever's looking at you or whoever has their eye on you, they can kind of get an understanding on what kind of person you are by looking at the type of stuff that you're putting out there. What your interests are by looking at what do you talk about the most, or are you a person that likes to troll, or are you a really type of person that really try to get an understanding, or do you really want to understand? Do you ask a lot of questions? And I realized that when I say something nice, they respond back with the thank you, but there's no elaborated conversation. But when you start talking about controversy, that draws out a lot of other kind of people. And then now the comments are coming, but it's not the comments that you're looking for. You don't really too much want to debate on a subject. You just want to get that information out there, be like, hey, this is on my mind, because that's what Facebook is about. And sometimes Facebook gets so overly opinionated that we take everything that a lot of people say in such a negative way. Because to me, I strongly believe in debating is not a negative format. I think it's another way of communicating with people, that you're telling your views, I'm telling my views, and we're just putting it on a forum where everybody's reading. And guess what? Out of all that communication that we're having, we can come out of this with a better understanding of each other and the situation. You can have an argument without using profanity, without being negative. You can say something, your view, I can tell you my view. I can tell you my experience, you can tell me your experience. When I open up my eyes and be like, wow, I never saw it from that side, because guess what? I'm not on your side. When I talk about the experience that I'm having as a Blasian woman, I don't like the fact that a non-Blasian person is telling me how I should feel or what I should and should not say, because that's my experience. And if this is a forum where we're talking about experience, I think a lot of people have a problem with reality. And I don't think it has anything to do with racism and all that. I just think underneath all that stuff, people have a problem with reality. And that's the only question that's out there, is what's the reality of this situation, without assuming. But then when people start getting negative and start saying things, you have no choice but to assume, because they avoid the question, or they say other things that's not making sense. It's like you're just trying to stick to one subject and they change it. It's because people are uncomfortable with reality. And I'm just telling you, that has to do with a lot of things that's going on. Even trying to meet somebody. Like they're on a whole different agenda than you are, and nobody knows how to conversate anymore. Like you're trying to say something and then they tell you, well, why do you think like that? Well, just because that's the way I think. But we can talk more a little bit about it. Maybe you should ask me, why do you think that way? Tell me a little bit more about why you feel that way. Or tell me a little bit more about what you think it should be versus you just blatantly just saying, oh, well, it's because you're this and you're that. See, that to me is derogatory because now you're telling somebody about them. You don't even know them to be telling them. So that's a lot in relationships when you're trying to date other ethnic groups. You're just trying to get an understanding on how they think. So if they are talking about, like religion, like you can't talk to an atheist about your religion. They're not concerned, they're not interested, but if you're Christian and I'm Baptist, or if I'm Catholic, we both have a religion. Let's talk about that. That don't mean I'm trying to convert you into Catholicism. I just want you to understand where I'm coming from my point of view. You tell me from your point of view. That's a respect level. But that's why I try to figure out, like when I'm looking in these Facebook groups, like what is it that they're looking for? Like I'm saying the nice things, but then when I say something negative, I get a lot of response, but not the response that I'm looking for. So that's why I kind of like backed off. Because I haven't been on Facebook a lot, but I used to be on these groups, and I realized like these groups don't talk about anything because they're really not talking. They're just posting pictures and just posting situations, and nobody's really engaging in a conversation, like talking about a topic, about relationship communication, positive communication or negative, but nobody was really pulling on each other's brain. We're acting like we're sitting in these groups, like most of them I got out of, but some of them you're just like sitting there like you're in kindergarten, you're just waiting for your teacher to tell you to speak, So sometimes you don't know what a person is thinking when you're looking, like if you're in one of these groups and you've been there for 2 years and you're looking through what's going on and whatever that group is called, you don't see that interaction going. So I sometimes think like, what is the underlying issue? Then if you created this group, where are those people that's supposed to be in creation of that group? So that's why I sometimes try to get a better understanding of what really is going on. It's the reality of things. To be honest, what I really want the groups to understand is that they have to be sensitive to other people's background as well. Like, again, I'm on the group, and like I said, that's why it was a little twist, because even though I consider myself a Black woman mostly, that's the reason why I picked the group, because I felt like it was really saying Black woman. And the only reason why I call myself Black woman, because it's hard for me to consider myself, it was really hard for me to consider myself a Blasian woman, because I always realized that I didn't have that support on that Asian side to define the Asian side of me. So I had to seek out it on my own. So, but in these groups, I just want them to understand that, we really want to get to know that culture. And it's not always just dating them, but also just a friendship level to get a full understanding on their customs, their beliefs, what is it they like, how to communicate with them, or what is it that they like. Like, it's two different cultures trying to come together and just try to figure each other out. And it may not be you that person will learn a lot from, but just in the dynamics of being in a community like that, you start to get to understand and have a feeling of what it is that they're looking for. Not only yourself, but if you know what you're looking for, like you like what you like. And it's I don't know if people are just trying to be on these channels for whatever reason. Everybody has their agenda, as I said, but I really was on this channel because I really wanted to know that side of me that I don't get to know on a personal level. So I wanted to get to meet somebody on this channel that's full Asian, so I can understand that part of me, so I can ask those questions, get to a point where we get comfortable as a friendship. Then I can ask those questions. Oh, okay, what was it like growing up for you? Like, have you had any Black friends? What's your experience on Black people? Like, maybe they are afraid. Maybe something happened to them in their life with, I don't know. I just really want to get an understanding, a full understanding of why they, why when it comes to a lot of Black women, why is it so hard for the communication to start? Because a lot of the groups that I'm in, I don't too much see them talking. So that's why you don't want to assume, but at the same time, it's like their groups are out there, but the group is out there for a reason, because there are Asian men out there that do want to get to know a Black woman, or vice versa, but I don't see it. So I don't see it. So that's why I'm just trying to get a fully understanding on what that group is really about. So, it's more like an educational background. I mean, if I meet somebody on there, that would be, I mean, the best dynamic or the best thing that ever happened in the group. But I'm telling you right now, I have not met an actual Asian person besides you that can actually, just have a basic conversation to see what page you're on, or just see what it's about. I mean, I don't think it's really like, you're really not trying to figure out like they're aliens or anything like that, but more of, like I said, the custom. Because just because you look at somebody doesn't mean that you don't know what they know. I mean, I know a lot of African people out here that speak different languages that people don't understand. Some people, I know a Black person who speaks Russian. You would have never known that living in the neighborhood that they live in. But just to be open sometimes to meeting somebody, especially in the group that's outside of yourself, just to see, what it is that you can bring together and see what you can get out of that, regardless of what it is, even if it's just a friendship or just an acquaintance or someone that can help you learn about certain things that's in their culture that you have a question about, and why not go to the source? So, I don't know what it is that that they're trying to get out of the group, but I would really, really, really be interested to know what it is that they're looking for in the group. As far as like why I think they should, I guess it's their preference. I don't think I can answer why I think they should. I know the reason why I want to is because I want to date somebody that understands me on that aspect level. Like, I go to my mom's house, like custom. It just goes without having to explain, eating the food without question. And I sometimes think like dating an Asian man. I wanted to say this in a group, but I told you before that there's a lot of things that I want to speak about, but I get afraid to say that. So that's why I wish that there was a forum where you could just speak openly about it without people getting offended all the time. But some of this stuff, again, like I told you, it's the reality of things. And sometimes the reality of things is a scary topic to talk about, but it's necessary. Again, if you want to date an Asian man, you got to know the culture. I mean, you got to know the culture. You got to understand why the parents are the way that they are, why they do the things that they are. Like, there's like, my mother came to the United States, and she, Koreans, I'm going to speak basically on Koreans because that's who my mother is and that's who I was raised around. But when it comes to Koreans, it's like their custom is very, I wouldn't say rude, but a lot of people would think that it's rude. But in their culture, they speak their mind. That's where I sometimes get my speaking of the mind without questioning myself. It's just, I really want to know. And I'm not being offensive. I'm not trying to be rude. I really want to know. My mother told me one time, she said, if you date I don't know, this is something that my mother said, but she used to always say to me, if you date a Black man, make sure he's handsome, but if, if my mom would have said that to somebody like around my friend, one of my friends would say to me, like, well, some of my girls would say, why did your mom say that? Like, why does it always have to be about looks when it comes to you dating somebody? I said, because that's how Koreans are. They say those things. They don't necessarily mean it in a way, but it's the sarcasm of them. They have that. Like sometimes, Korean parents would be like, oh, make sure you date a man with a lot of money. It's sarcasm underneath that, because everybody in the world doesn't have all the kind of money. But when you look at TV shows, even when they came out with that movie, My Crazy Asian, Rich Asian or whatever, I didn't watch that movie, but I heard about that. But my background is I used to do script writing. So okay. I used to be like, why are you guys writing it this way? I'm very, I mean, I watch a lot of things, but certain things is like, oh my God, like this reminds me of my mom. Like, oh God, like she's like, it just brings back certain memories. It just that's what I'm saying. You see how when you asked that, you stopped and you actually asked me why, but it wasn't because it's a racial thing. It just brings me back to a moment in my life that I don't really want to think about when it came to my mom. And sometimes it's like, she always used to say things like that to me. And I used to be like, it's not like I'm trying. It's not like I'm not trying to meet an Asian man. Like you need to tell me how. You need to tell me how, like how do I do that? Like I want to, the custom is I know those customers getting smacked with a shoe. Like I got beat with a wooden spoon and a shoe. That stuff brings back memories. And, sometimes things that are jokes to them, it may not be jokes to some people because it's actually true. Like there's a lot of, African movies that I can't watch because just seeing it, it kind of brings back weird memories that some of that stuff be for real. But people think it's comedy, but that's just my personal setting. But it's not like I wouldn't watch it, but I'm just not ready to watch it right now. I'm really trying to get a full understanding of something first. Because I know that I know that movie. It really brings back even with my sisters and the stuff that she went through in her marriage and stuff like that. And it's controversial, but it's a personal thing. Why? And it has something like my friends. That's another thing to talk about, but that's probably another subject. But my friends will always say that, like, why you don't want to watch that? It's just, I'm like, because it brings back certain kind of memories that I don't want to laugh about at that moment. So that's why I say when I get a full understanding, because I still have questions on why. So, and when I see stuff like that, it's like, man, I know that culture. I know that's, I know certain things in there is true. And something out there is a little, sarcastic. And some of them is a little passive aggressive. But I see all that in my mother, and she's just that way. And sometimes it could be sad. Like my mother has never met, my mom only met one man in my life. That's it. Because you can't, I know a lot of other cultures they can't, but I know a lot of cultures they don't care. They just bring, hey, this is the person I'm dating. But I still have that traditional culture. Like I don't bring a lot of people around my mother. I have a lot of friends that I've known since I was in 6th grade. They still haven't seen my mother. They still haven't met my mother. It's just it's that tradition that's in there. So I understand sometimes, even when I'm in Korea, my grandmother, like she's just like the grandmother, just so like just matter of fact, like people think, oh, your mom's just being like racist and stuff. It's not racist. It's just they're just so vocal about things. Like they don't think that what they're saying is not right. They just say it because they just say it. They don't mean no harm sometimes, They just say certain things because that's just how they feel. And plus the English, the way it comes out, they don't use certain predicates and they don't use certain adjectives to make the sentence sound more calm. It just sounds so aggressive because it's the words that they use, So yeah, I probably have to suck it up and just sit there and just watch it. I, I would say it's more of because the it's the language barrier. That's what the issue is. So when my kids come around, there's no talking, so it's uncomfortable for them, especially as us. um when again, when my mom gets with her sister, there's nothing but clattering, just going back and forth, just constant good conversation, I'm sure, because there's laughing, there's crying, there's slapping on the back, there's pushing each other, which a lot of people find to be a little aggressive. But like I said, that's how Koreans are. They show that kind of emotion. They hit, they tell each other that they're stupid, and they don't think that it's derogatory, but that's how they talk. But there's a language barrier, because I'm looking at my mom having a good conversation with her sister, just talking and laughing. But when she leaves and it's just us in the room, it's quiet. She'll say certain things. She'll say a couple of words. She'll sometimes think about what she's trying to say. She's trying to come up with the words that she's trying to use. So she'll say it in Korean and then she'll say it in English. And I'm like, okay, I know what you're saying. It's a very difficult communication, um, dynamic. But you try the best way that you can to understand what it is. But it's just basic things. Are you hungry? I can't go to my mom and be like, Mom, let me tell you what happened today at work today. I can't have those conversations with her. That's why I've just started on Corsica trying to learn how to speak basic Korean. I listen to podcasts. That's why I watch a lot of, I grew up on a lot of Korean, but their language, it's different. If you weren't born with it, it's very hard to have that natural born communication. Like it's just hard to get everything. You start to mess up, and then you start thinking. So it's like learning any language. It just doesn't seem authentic enough, because when you're talking, you're just free to, like, you use little small words. Everything is not informal and formal. You could just say hi mom instead of just saying hello mom, how are you doing. That's not how we would talk to our parents. We're like, what's up mom, what you got going on. It's hard to talk like that because it's a language barrier. I don't know how to talk to my mom. So it's just little basic. We eat, we drink soju, we drink beer, and that's it. And then she'll say a few points. she'll cry about certain things, and then she'll say a few words why she's crying. I really don't understand her emotion, but it's really hard to get to understand, um, because of the language barrier. But that's why sometimes I used to think that that would be a reason why I couldn't really, date an Asian man. But then I would say, hey, that doesn't mean all Asian people just speak one language. There's some that speak different language. So I'm like, okay, so that's not a problem. That can't be a problem. Then I used to be like, okay, well, maybe it'd be hard to communicate because they don't know how to express themselves. But I'm like, but that's not a problem either, because I'm talking to my mom. And regards to little things that she's saying, I can basically understand what she's saying. I don't know to the depth of what it is that she's really trying to say when she's trying to feel about something, but I got a general idea. So I know how to put my emotions with hers and sympathize and empathize and back off and be quiet or sit still. That's communication regardless of how it is. So, when it comes to my kids and my mom, it's just pretty much silence. We eat, we'll watch TV, she'll ask a few questions, but there's no full, complete, like situation, like, oh, we're all just freaks friendly, but she doesn't mind sitting there watching movies with us or trying to have a conversation with us and just trying to figure out how to say certain things. And she'll ask the kids certain things and they'll tell her something. And she'll be like, no, I don't, that's too hard for me. I'm not even going to try to figure that one out. But that's the fun part, because not only are you trying to learn that person, but that person is learning you too. And you're learning something. But so that when it comes to my kids, like, around my mother, even with my aunt, it's not that bad because you got to communicate somehow, because that's my mother. And so, there's certain things that I understand that she's saying. There's certain things that I don't. But what I don't understand, sometimes I'll go and I'll research it and study it. Then that's how I know little small Korean words. So that's why I'm trying to learn how to speak it so I could talk to my mom fluently and actually have that basic conversation with her. But I actually used to say to myself, if I learn this language, I need somebody on the opposite end that I can talk to sometimes like that. And that's why I'm like, the community would help. The community, because it's a really basic, again, like I said before, a reality. So it's that conversation I'm having with that person face to face is a reality conversation, not something that you learn from a school book where they're just trying to tell you to be formal. And sometimes you can't be like that. Reality is just, hey, what's up? What you cooking in the kitchen? But I can't talk to my mom like she's a supervisor, and be so like, taught, because, they don't teach you slang when you're learning online. So that's when you get to meet somebody, you're like, hey, how do you say this? Or how would I approach my mom like this? Oh, blah, 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 blah. Oh, let me try that. And then get to just, learning the language because you're hearing it from somebody else. Or even if I say, hey, I'm going to call you on Friday. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to have a little small conversation with you. But that's how you learn. But you can't have that dynamic if you don't have the resources. How I grew up north and how I was being treated by the Korean community, it just felt like we didn't belong there. So of course, when you feel like you don't belong in a community, what do we normally do? We pack up and we move. So when I became an adult and I got pregnant with my first child, I moved. I moved out of I moved out of my mother's place and I moved out south, where I'm like, well, I have a lot of Black friends and maybe I'd be a lot more comfortable being out there with them, because it didn't work this way. I didn't even meet one Korean friend during grammar school. So maybe in my mind, again, you have to think of it as a child's point of view, growing up, like, okay, we're not wanted here because you just get tired of the same thing. So, being in a neighborhood, that's even to this day, my sisters don't have friends. Like when I mean friends, I mean, they don't really have like, they didn't meet any Asian friends either. Even to this day, none of them have an actual Asian friend. So, so when I got a little older, I just stuck around the African American community because this seemed like it was more acceptable for me. I felt more comfortable. I could talk. They were more acceptable letting me in. So I would think like, you know, that's where the loyalty would be at that moment. Because growing up, I didn't have a problem with my identity because I felt like I wasn't accepted anywhere else. So when I got with the African American people, I felt like they're more susceptible to me. They it's a lot of things that I do without question, but it's just a part of my culture that is where I'm uncomfortable at. And that's why I want to link and get personal on that side. But that's why I think at this age, I'm thinking, okay, I'm pretty want to date an Asian guy, because I think that's where my soul is at, because I understand that culture more because I've raised by my mother. I don't eat a lot of American foods. I don't know how to, I cook a lot of American foods because it's just the basic things, but I love Korean food. I love Asian food. I love the community. You know, I support them. And sometimes I just want to get a full understanding of to getting that support back, but I just want to know how. I just want to know, how do you approach them? Like, I've tried, like, smiling again, like I've tried different things. It's not like I keep myself isolated and just stick to one kind, but it's just like, people have to understand too, like, everybody's afraid of rejection, but if you really want something, you're going to try. But it's not like I've never tried it. It's like if I'm sitting on a rock, just saying to myself, like, looking at the fish out there, and like, I wonder what that tastes like. I wonder what that tastes like. I wonder if that tastes like. But if I don't never go out there and put the hook out there and catch those fishes that I want to taste, how would I know? I would always have that question of what it tastes like. So I sat on that boat and just started fishing. But if nobody catches, the bait, then I will always wonder what it tastes like. So I'm trying to figure out if I'm using the wrong bait, or if is my approach wrong. Do I got to dive into the water and catch it myself? Like, I'm just trying to figure out the approach in things, because I'm very open to a lot of things. I have friends of different ethnic groups. When I found the Blasian group, I felt at home. Like, this is the most exhilarating thing in my life, besides anything, that I feel like I belong to a community that finally understands me. So, but when I went into those communities, a lot of those people in those communities are, they're in all different states, but I've developed a relationship with them. Like, they're so easy to talk to. And I have a lot of Blasian friends, but what I was missing was still that other side of me that I want to connect to, besides just my mom and my aunt. And like you said, just family. I want a friend or friends, hey, let me come out there and see what you got going on out there. Let me, just friends. And how do you do things? Like, why do we do this? And why do we do that? Like, a full understanding on, the beliefs and, the study of loving everything. Like, I know some of them still have that Buddhism in them, where they just, the way that they think and how they are, how they can sit. Like, I want to know all that stuff. I want to know what it's like to go to my friend's house and just sit on the floor, because once my mother is gone, it's just going to be me. And I'm not going to have that resource and dynamic to sit unless I go to a restaurant. And that's what I've been looking at lately, going to restaurants. But I want that home friend, like, just like, hey, where that, an Asian person could look at you and be like, oh man, yeah, I kind of like her. Like, I want that, but it's really difficult to find. And I'm just trying to figure out the approach. I would pretty much tell people that you are different. And once you accept that you are different, then you can accept anything. If you're curious about who you are and where you are, go to the source. Again, you will never know what that fish tastes like if you don't go out there and see what each individual fish tastes like. You gotta, don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, when I was growing up, I was afraid to ask questions because I didn't know. I just thought the right way was you be quiet and you don't say anything. And this is the way life is. But if you know deep down inside that you want to learn something more, you want to, like, again, like with me, I want to learn that side of me. I know it's a challenge, but, even trying to be on this group chat and this interview with you, it was, at first, I kind of backed out on it, but I'm like, you know what? I'm a very vocal person, and I got to go for what I know. And that's being vocal and letting other people know that you are different. You're going to be talked about, or you're going to be liked, or you're going to be disliked. No matter who you are, you got to still be yourself, because what matters to you the most is who you are. And I think the reason, again, that I would love to tell, like, Blasian people out there, is that the reason why you have those underlying thoughts and urges is because that's a side of you that you don't understand. And it's nothing wrong trying to go seek it. The reason why I sometimes feel like, why I always got to do everything the right way? Why do I always got to think that this is the right way? Why do I believe in this so much? Why do I feel like that, I got to be this way? Why do I feel like sometimes your culture is the reason why you feel that way? But that's why you don't know who you are, because you got to seek that. If you are Hispanic, you got to go seek out that part of you that exists in you. Because if our ancestors go trickle down to other, in each and every one of us, then we understand that, So culture is very important in any relationship. You have to know where you're from to get a full understanding of who you are. You sometimes wake up and like, man, why do I feel this way? It's not just because you feel that way. It's because something that's in you that That's a part of who you are. And when you seek it, then you'll understand. You know, there's a lot of times I wonder, like I dress different. Like before I even knew it, I used to do like, you know, I carry my kids on my back like this, and you know, that's just because a lot of people used to ask me like, why do you carry your kid on? I was like, I don't know, it's just always been in me. My mother used to do that to me. She carried me on her back, or sometimes why when I give gifts, I tie them in little handkerchiefs and just, I mean, I don't know why, but I used to just see my mom doing it. And I see a lot of things that's in me. And I'm like, yeah, I see a lot of people don't do it this way, but why? Why do I do it? Why do I love doing it? But that's the other side that I'm trying to get a full understanding. And I want to have that compatibility of somebody that does the same that I do without question. And why do you do it that way? Because, you know, I was raised that way. You know, why do you hit your kids with this? And this? I don't know, I was raised that way. Like it's instilled in me. I don't know why. It just runs through my blood. Certain things that I say, certain things that I do, you know, it's just instilled in me. And that's the part of me that I don't understand. So if you want to know your full identity, you got to research that other side of you. You have to embrace it. If you like it or not, you have to embrace it. I've always had an interest in Black guys because, again, that's that area when I got older, who accepted me the most. So, but I always had an interest in Asian men. I always did, even back when I was young. Like I said, when I was like 14, you know, I have fetishes of K-pop idols and actors and stuff like that. And you know, it's just, again, like I always had that interest, but again, I just never had the resources to where to go. Like, you know, there's a place out here in Chicago. It's called Chinatown. You can walk down, and there's a lot. It's like an Asian community of all different ethnic Asians, but you you meet, when you, even I'm sure that if you spoke to a dating expert, they always tell you like eye contact is everything. But if you can't get them to stop with it, they're not interested. Like you can't run after them and hey, you know what I'm saying? You start off with eye contact. So when you meet and then you see some kind of sincerity, then you know that there's the next step. But if you can't get to that next step, you're just gonna keep looking until you meet that eye contact. And you know, so I think in as far as dating, you know, how the dating realm is this day and age, I think is a lot harder today because there's so many different dynamics of dating. And again, I always say that everybody has their own agenda. Some people are looking for long term, some people are just looking for someone to hook up with, or you don't know nobody's story. That's why I always say when I get on these forums, I'm not looking to straight on date. I'm looking for a friendship first. I need to get to know who you are, because you could date somebody for 5, 10 years. You don't get to really know who they are, but at least you'll know their intentions, because you can see them doing certain things. You can see when someone's interested in you or not, you know. And when it comes to dating, it's just like, sometimes you can outgrow things. And I think a lot of problem in relationships is people get comfortable. That's one of my pet peeves in relationships. You know, when you get comfortable in a relationship, it gets boring. And a lot of times men don't know that, because a lot of times men are redundant creatures. They do the same thing. You know, it's the same dynamics of, you know, a man's mind is like, you go to work, take care of your family. It's the same dynamics. And it's just more like, they get comfortable when they get with a woman. You know, as soon as they marry a woman, it's just, you know, they get comfortable. And then when you get comfortable, you become, again, as I said, you get bored. And when you get bored, what do you do when you get bored? You seek other things. And I don't think that when you break up in a relationship that is something that's extremely personal. It's just like when you're a child and you get your first pair of shoes. You're not going to wear those shoes 10 years from then, but it's the most exciting thing in the world. And then in time, you outgrow it. And you may not ever want to throw those shoes away, but guess what? It's the best. It's the shoes that you ever wanted, but that doesn't mean it's going to last. You know what I'm saying? So you have to sometimes sit back and think like this, everything gets old. Situations get old too. So you just get, so a lot of times I think in this day and age, I think serious relationships come when people really know what they really want and who they really are. Because if you don't know who you are, you're going to always be seeking. Always be seeking. And if you don't know who you are fully, then dating somebody, you can't give them the fullest because you're not full. So, but that's why I always say being friends first is always good. You know, it's okay to date, but some people are looking for long-term relationships and some people are just looking for experiences, you know? And nobody's gonna come and date you and say, oh, I'm just dating you because I just want to see what you're like. I mean, maybe they say it, maybe they don't. I never heard nobody say that, but I'm always in long-term relationships. And sometimes I think that's why I think I want to just change that dynamic to just make sure, hey, maybe you should just try something different. Try something different. Like, try not to be in long-term relationships. Just see what it's like to just get to know just to know people. When you start to get to know other people, you start to realize some things about yourself that you don't even know. So it's a both learning experience, but at the same time, there's so many dating apps and everybody says everything. And pretty much dating apps to me is basically more of images. People just really want to see what you are. Like, they really can't have a basic conversation with you. It's just so blasé. Like, it's just, oh, how are you? How are you doing? That's it. It's just no conversation. You know what I'm saying? Just none whatsoever. So I don't know. Just the dating game is extremely difficult and it's hard. I do see it, but I don't see it from an Asian side. I see it from other races, but I don't see it from an Asian person.
Oh,
I
okay.
haven't from Asian person haven't really 100% Asian. When I say that, like, I know people don't like those numbers, but that's just the only better reality way to actually explain it with people having a full understanding of what you're saying. Like, you don't want to make it seem like, oh, what does that mean? No, I'm not really trying to put emphasis on the part of how much of a ethnicity group are you, but what I'm just I am an African American. My father's African American, and my mother is Korean. So I'm talking about a Korean or Asian or Chinese or Japanese male have not reached out to me in that way. I get a lot of other races, but I haven't gotten that race. So that's why I started to open up my community a lot more by going in these groups.
Okay.
So that's why the group is important for it to be effective, because there are people, I'm sure there's a lot more people out there like me where, again, to be honest with you, like, neighborhood has a lot to do with it too. Like, whatever neighborhood you're in, you're not going to see those type of people, in your basic library or at your grocery store, at the laundromat. You don't see that. You see what your community has. So when you go outside of that community and you try, it's hard. It's hard because you don't know how to do the approach. You don't know, just like your video that you had, how, like, you had the guy approach the African American woman, and he was getting a little reluctant, a little shy about it. And he was like, oh man, I don't know what it is. But, he just tried the basic approach by just going up there and just saying, hey, would you like to go on a date? And she just blatantly just said no. But then at the end of it, she said yes, because she got to know a little bit more about him. But that's where it starts. You don't know what you really like until you're actually engaged in it. So that's why sometimes I just, that's my opinion. I mean, it's only my opinion, because you cannot make somebody do something that they don't do or that they're uncomfortable with. But that's the part that that's the unknown for me, because I don't know. I don't know if that's what it is. I don't know if it's because they're afraid to talk to them. I don't know if they don't know what to say. But a basic hi and hello is the start of a conversation. But if you don't even start that, there can't be no interest. So if you can't get past step one, you're not going to get to two. So the introduction, that's what I said, introduction is important. So that's why if you go out into your neighborhood, or unless you go to their neighborhood to try to talk to them, it's hard because you don't know which one of them like something that's not who they are. You understand what I'm saying? So that's why these groups are very important, because you draw those kind of people to the site and they already know what it's about. So, regardless if it's 10, 15, or 20, at least you know that they are those people that are looking for someone like you, versus being out there in that world and keep shooting your shot and you keep getting, you're just getting, I don't like the word rejected, because rejected is something that is a default. It's no good, but that's not what I'm saying when it comes to rejection. It's just the feeling that you get, like, okay, that didn't work out. I'm sure that person's not interested. So you just really try to figure out what it is that, how you do your approach. Like, how do you know? Because it's not like you wear some kind of symbol to say that you date those kind of people, but like, I'm gonna be honest with you, like with me, I like what I like. It's sometimes you can have a different type of ethnicity group come up to you and try to, communicate with you. That's why I feel that way. And you'd be like, oh no, it's really cool, blah, 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 blah. I probably have a little basic conversation, hold the conversation. But when it comes to exchanging numbers, you're probably just like, no, I'm okay with that. You like what you like, because if you did it that way, you'd have a number, you have abundance of all types of friends, but then you'd be confused. But you want to go for what you like and you want to focus on that. So, that's another reason when dating apps, when you asked that earlier question about dating, that's a lot of problems in dating too, because there's a lot of people out there that are afraid to reject somebody. So they end up in a relationship that they don't want to be with because they just want to try it out. But that's not what you really like. If you're really interested in that, then go to what you're interested in. But if you're just talking to somebody because you're talking to them, you keep forgetting there's other people and feelings involved besides yourself. So if you know that, like, let's say you're a type of person, you're like, I don't really like dating. I'm only going to go with what I am. So I just want to disclose anything that's out there because I'm not trying to, put racism on anything, but I'm an African-American woman and a Korean woman. And if I'm looking at my dating scene and I can say, I only want to date African-American and Korean men or both. I don't want to date this kind of race because that's not what I like. If that's not what I like, that's just, it's just even if you really haven't been out there, but you know what it is that you're looking for, what you like. There's some people out there that don't care, but there's some people who really map out to what they want. And it's not, I don't think there's anything wrong with that because you like what you like. I mean, you can't force a relationship on somebody, but that's another reason why probably in the dating scene that we have so many issues because we tweak, like we're trying to create what we want, and that's not reality. At this current time, I really like I like interaction. When I go out, I like if I see something that I like that I find interesting, I do what the normal person would do. Is just you have eye contact and you might say something that's cute or you might compliment them somewhere. I mean, complimenting something doesn't necessarily mean that's that you're trying to show them anything, but you're just trying to see where they're where they're comfortable at. So sometimes that can strike up a conversation if they say, oh yeah, well, you know what, you really look nice too. Oh, okay. So, just that dynamic. But people are so busy this day, like nobody has time for a conversation. Nobody has time. So a lot of times, going back with what you were saying previous about when it came to relationships and how comfortable you are, like, doing all aspects of relationship to me is nice. Like I don't too much get on Facebook too much because I really don't know. You can look at a person's profile. That doesn't necessarily mean that you'll know who that person is. People are just talking about the hottest topic. But one thing I don't like to do too much is to talk about the topics that's trending. I don't get into the trending. I like to just talk about things like Facebook's asks, what's on your mind? Today, I told you from the beginning of this interview that people are afraid of themselves. People are afraid of themselves. Like, I'm gonna give you this thing that I usually say. I say, men usually say that they're not afraid of a lot of things, that they're brave, they're not afraid of a lot of things, you gotta be masculine. But one thing that I realized that men are afraid of is themselves. They don't know themselves. That's why they feel like they can't be emotional. They get too scared. They always say the word rejection. It's not about rejection because sometimes, it's just like a salesperson. Just because you went to this store, they said, no, that doesn't mean everybody in here. Somebody might need it. That doesn't mean that it discourages you to stop. But, when you're doing it so much, sometimes you have to step back from it and try to figure out, okay, I need a different approach. How do I get somebody to just not see that I'm selling something, but this thing that I have that I want to sell is something that I feel like that they need. That's how I am in relationships. I like a lot of times, I don't like to get into conversations where men say things to me like, oh, I'm this great guy and, blah, 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 blase, blase, they just talk about themselves. And then you sometimes think like, then if you're such a great person, what's really going on? What's really going on? But there's a lot of people out here that are so, they're so matter of fact, like they want to do the hashtag trend. And that's why it's so hard to date nowadays, because when you ask somebody what they're looking for, again, like I told you, when you're going on these dating websites, a lot of times you're only going to hit the button that you're interested in is if you like what you see at first. 90% of the time, people are not reading profiles. And then you get into a relationship with somebody, not reading their bio, regardless if it's them or not, but at least taking your shot at it. And then you realize this person is this person is that. Go back and read their bio. You're going to see they're exactly what they said they were. But see, you're too busy looking at what they look like. And I'm not saying that you can't be with somebody that you what they look like, because what they look like is not probably what they're saying that what they are in here. What are you really looking for? So in relationships, that's why I say that I'm kind of different when I do the approach, because a lot of women would sometimes say like, why are you with this guy? And I would sometimes say it's not always about looks, not saying that they have to really be drop dead gorgeous or so far off the map, but they got to be appealing to me. What I like is not maybe something that you don't like. What I see that's handsome in a man is probably not handsome in my friend the way that she sees in a man. Maybe she likes her, but we're so consumed with what everybody else thinks. That's why we end up in relationships we don't want. Oh, why are you with him, girl? Because he's so fine. He's got this body. So in my mind, I'm thinking, if this man is really got a body and he works out and you don't work out, you have a problem. Like, that relationship is not going to work. He's really in tune with his body. If you don't care about what you look like, you don't think that he's going to have a problem someday, somewhere along the line. Like, you got to really look at what you're really looking for, because what you're looking for is probably not what you are either. A lot of times, I play around with my cousin all the time. And I always say, sometimes men look for trophy looking women, but they don't have that trophy looking personality. So you want something like that to work. But if you see a woman and she's done up, and when you walk up to her, when you do the approach and you ask her, so, hey, ma'am, how's it going? And then you get a conversation going, and then she tells you she's single, and you're looking at, people are not looking. They're just, oh, I want that. Just like how kids are when they go to a store and they see a piece of candy. Oh, I want that because it's shiny and it looks good. But when you actually get it, it's probably black licorice. You don't know. You just want it because it's candy, but you don't know what it tastes like till you get it. So that's the same thing as dating. Like, you just don't know what it tastes like until you actually get it. So, you get with somebody, you see their dynamics. You see that this person gets, well done hair. You see that they're getting their nails done. You see they got on real expensive name brand clothes, and you're not that kind of person. So why are you even looking for something like that when that compatibility is already at a negative? But they want it, so they go for it. And that's why people get into relationships that don't last, because they're not really looking into what they want inside. You can't have that woman over there that's driving this kind of car. And I'm not saying that you can. I'm not trying to discourage nobody. I don't want nobody to ever think, well, that's a self-esteem issue. No, it's really a relationship issue. When you see a woman who's single and she tells you she's single, she has children and she's a single mother and she's raising her children. She's got her own house. She drives her own car. She goes to work. She's doing these things. And if you can't compare yourself to that woman by being have that same kind of dynamic, you're barking up the wrong tree, and I'm not saying that you can never find anything that's higher than you, but at that level, you're not ready for that. You just probably want to be that person that you just want to see what that looks like, but that's not the kind of woman that you want to go see what it looks like. You see, she has her stuff together. And if you don't have your stuff together, there's no compatibility. You have to know who you are inside. That's why I'm telling you, like, when it comes to dating, you got to know who you are inside. You got to be comfortable who you are. You got to be very confident in who you are, because if you're not, somebody would tear your whole world down easily. You have to be okay with who you are. That's why I want that side, because that's something I've always wanted since I was 14. And I'm not afraid to say that if I don't ever get it, that's a hill to die on. But that's a challenge for me that I still haven't given up, even since I was 14. So I want the Asian community to understand that I am Asian. I haven't given up on them, but I want them to be a lot more open to the diversity of what the world is today, because almost a lot of people are single. Are mixed. And going back to what you were saying when it comes to Asian women dating, Caucasian men, I wanted to say that, but I wanted to be very careful on how I said that, because I've lived in that community and I saw it. And there was this one girl that my mom's best friend, she was Japanese and Philippine. She was beautiful. She was so beautiful, and she was getting hits on all the time by white men. And I used to say to her, like, you're not interested in Asian men? and she would say, no, I just want a white man because they're rich. I said, if that's the only reason why you want to be with somebody, white people aren't the only people that's rich. What you're not really looking for just a white person that's rich, because there's other people that's rich. Like, be real with yourself, because that's a stupid reason to want to be with somebody in that aspect because he's rich. What if he loses everything? Then what? You're not gonna like him anymore? So who are you really, and what are you really looking for? Like, you're already looking for a relationship to fail. And a lot of times men like that too. They like the women that like that materialistic thing about them. You know, so that's why when I, you know, especially with that movie, with the Asian movie, that's why I was like, I'm probably gonna have to watch it soon. But I'm just saying, like, I understand, like, it's too much of a reality that almost seems like, wow, man, it's almost like the reality of it. It's almost the truth. It's my mother says it to me all the time, and I'm like, money is not the root of everything. You know, just to be comfortable in a relationship with somebody. I want loyalty, and a lot of people always ask me, like, oh, what's, you know, okay, so what, you know, you can have loyalty. No, loyalty is different. Loyalty is different from faithfulness. You can't, you know, being faithful is, they should erase that out of the dictionary. I think faithfulness is only pertaining to religion and the person that you are. I don't think it should ever be connected to a relationship, because if you love that person, love won't make you do the stuff that you do to hurt that person. Like, even when I mean faithfulness, I mean, even if you get to a situation where you feel like you don't want to be with that person anymore, it's all about being loyal to that person by letting them know what it is. The loyalty is what's underneath it all, is that you're going to have my back and that you won't do anything to me or this family to jeopardize what we got going on, not for something that you don't really know about. You know, when you get into a relationship, it's hard trying to stay in a relationship, but when you start looking outside of the relationship, like, you're really trying to be with this person because you're really you want me to be 100% of something, but whatever that percentage is that I'm not, that's what you're actually looking for. That's not how the relationship works. Like, nobody sacrifices this day and age. Everybody is selfish. Everybody wants what they want, regardless of the price. You know, so that's why I say, when it comes to you know, the relationship dynamics, it's hard to find loyal people out there. It really is. And that's what I'm saying. Like, a person wouldn't know the kind of person I am if they don't get to know who I am, just to see me from the outside. And you can't talk on Facebook and tell everybody about the type of person you are. They'll only know that internally. That's why face to face and conversations like this is very important, because you get to get a feel of what that person is and how they react to certain situations and who they really are. That's why sometimes when you have forums on Facebook, you really can't tell what it is. That's why I said sometimes a person can't write a whole book to explain who they are, because when you do an autobiography, you have a whole book. An autobiography doesn't come with 10 pages. You'll never get to know who that person is until you read the whole book. There's points and experiences about that person that's in there that you'll get to know further who they really are. But you can't figure it out within just one page or 15 sentences or a paragraph. So it has to have that interaction, that little text messages here and there. Even if you take every text message that you ever wrote, I don't think it really conjure up to an actual book. It's just small little mumbo jumbo. But the reality of a conversation is sitting next to each other and really getting to see their body language, you know, how they're interacting. Like, that's how you really know if the person is for you. But when you're doing this on, you know, like dating apps, you really don't know who they are, because they're telling you what you want to hear. But you have to actually see them in the realm of their actual community, meaning in their home, how they are with their children. Like, you know, we're in all these groups, but you really think that every human being that's in these groups are really who they say they are? You know, I really don't think that. You know, they hide behind that facade. And that's why it's important to, you know, just like pictures, you know, you look at pictures, you know, they do so many augmentations in pictures, you really don't know who you're meeting. And then by the time you meet that person, you're like, wow, they're like 30,000 times different than what they say they were. And then when you get to know them, they really have an attitude. Like, when you get to know somebody, we have this conversation where we're just talking, because I don't know you enough to say derogatory things to you. But when you get to know somebody, you get, see where the comfortable word comes, then you start cussing each other out and you start saying things like, you never said that to me before. You're saying it now because you're comfortable, you know? So that's where I think the relationships nowadays have issues, because we forget to respect each other. And again, culture, you have to know the culture. You have to know why people do certain things. And if you really want to be in a relationship, or if you really love somebody, you do the research. Just like you won't just go buy a house just because you like the house. You got to go see it. You got to check it out. You got to look at where it's at. There's a lot of dynamics to be someplace where you know you're going to spend your life at. That's the same thing with relationship. You got to do the research to know this is the person that you're going to share your most intimate and innermost secrets to. And you have to make sure that this person is trustworthy, you know, but also loyalty comes with everything. And that's hard to find these days. You don't see the loyalty in anybody anymore. Everybody's just doing what everybody else is doing. You know, they hide behind what other people are saying. Like, that's why when I said to you on Facebook, like, I don't want to get, you know, ambushed because I'm just speaking my mind. But a lot of times everybody's so opinionated, it's kind of scary to speak your mind in such a diverse way, because a lot of times people don't understand your experiences, but somebody out there might. And then that's how connection starts. Oh man, I remember when I was young, that happened to me, but I don't see none of that. I don't see nobody commenting on those type of, nobody talks about things like that. Like, there was another forum that I was in that we were talking about almost the same subject about Asian men and black women. And again, I was being ridiculed by the comments that I was making. Like, I was just saying, like, you know, it's hard to date an Asian man when you really don't know how to approach them, you know, because you don't know what's really going on in their mind. So when I really started telling them some experience of mine, they were making it seem like it was an opinion of mine. This was like maybe about I would say about a year ago. But I was just like, I couldn't believe that they were saying this stuff. I'm like, how are you guys going to tell me about what my experience is? That doesn't necessarily, I'm not putting it in a general, I'm not saying that this is what my thoughts were at that particular time. I'm just telling you what I've seen. And I'm sitting with Asian people at this table, and I'm hearing them what they're talking about. And it's not something that you want to hear. Mm-hmm. So it's just, you know, sometimes, again, like I say, when I didn't look at them saying it in a negative way. I just looked at them because they're afraid, because it's the language barrier. The same way with my mom doesn't fully understand. So, you know, you get into a relationship that you fully don't understand. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of tension going on because you really don't know how to do the approach. Then you don't know how that person conversates. And then not only that, if you don't know their culture, you don't know how to ease their mind, you know? And, you know, like this mama boy stuff, like I know a lot of Asian ethnicity. It's not mama's boys. The sons are very prominent in that culture. In other cultures, they don't look at it that way. It's whatever I have. But in the Asian culture, they want that son. It's still going on to this day. So it's not being a mama's boy. It's that you have to understand the dynamics of that mother is very intimidated by women that they don't feel is good enough for their son, because that's just how Asian moms are. My mom don't have any sons. But I know how it is, because even when my mom used to tell me about how much she wanted to have a boy, I understood how important it was to have a boy in the family. So that's why if you don't understand that culture, then you wouldn't understand the communication that they're having, why they, you know, when you have that attitude like, oh, you're such a mama's boy. No, you're not a mama's boy. It's just that the mom looks at them in a different way. Their responsibility is different. So that's why I said, I know these things. That's why I said, trying to be with an Asian person where I don't have to explain so much about that, and the culture already fits in, you know, the only part that you would have to capture is trying to, you know, get yourself to who you are and that person who they are, and actually come together, because the culture is there. But I don't know the approach. I don't know the approach. It's hard. That's the only challenge that I have. You know, you can only smile so much and you can only say so much, but what is that magic word? Okay, so again, I always ask myself this question too, but I think the number one thing that I pretty much look for when it comes to a guy is his values. You know, I think the most important part of a relationship is that he has to have that compatibility, that compatibility in value. Like, he has to want some of the things that you want in life, or when you look down the line, what is it that you're really trying to obtain? Because just because a person looks good, or you know, his hair is this, or whatever the situation is on the outside, the relationship won't last if you don't have no value. If you don't have a sense of humor, if you don't have a sense of wanting to get somewhere, or you don't know how to communicate. So I'm looking for someone who knows how to communicate on any level, regardless of what aspect of communication is, because communication just means two people are opening up to get a full understanding of who the other person is, you know? And I also am looking for someone who has a positive attitude. Like I'm telling you, everything doesn't have to necessarily be, oh, like those sayings, oh, good job, good that. When I mean positive, I mean some things that are negative can be positive as well. But as long as you're mature enough to talk about it, I think that stands too, because nowadays a lot of times people lack communication. They don't know how to talk. You know, it's just looking on the brighter things and just making sure that that regardless of what the situation is, it still can work. And another aspect of a man that I would like to have is where he's actually like emotionally mature. Where everything is not on an emotional standpoint. Like you don't have to sympathize or empathize with my feelings, but you have to understand where I'm coming from. And just because I'm saying something to you, that doesn't necessarily mean that I want you to change it. I just want you to know that that's something that's a part of me that makes me who I am, and I just want you to be aware of that. So somebody who has that mindsetting, and that he has some kind of integrity. It's this it's not more about what a person likes and what they don't like. It's just what he actually believed in, and if he actually lived by what he actually believes in. Because there's a lot of people out here who claim some kind of like religious status, but when you actually look at their lifestyle, you're like, wow, like what would your religion status would do if they found out that you're doing these things? Like that comes again with integrity and honesty, because not with me, but with yourself. If you're honest with yourself, then that means certain things when you're with somebody else, you expect the same thing. You want that in a person, and that he's protective. And when I mean protective, mean that all that drama and all that crazy stuff, like just be mature about the things that be mature be a mature man, should I say. Make the right decisions. Don't go by emotional how you feel emotionally. Sometimes emotions is just something that what you feel, but you can't base everything on how you feel. You got to step back and really let your brain go and just try to pick the best method of things. Like want to try something new. That's another thing that that I'm looking for, is somebody who wants to try something new. Like it's just an open approach to things. And again, I always say loyalty, because again, like if you're getting into a relationship, regardless if it's going to work or not, if you're loyal to the actual situation, then you can come about it right. Because if you get together and it's not working out, your loyalty to that person to make sure that you be honest with that person, you let them know, it gives them a better idea of what is going on, so they don't have no expectations of something, and then then it falls apart. So integrity and emotional intelligence means a lot, because you don't want somebody to just constantly just go off their emotions. But everybody feels different. You can't make me feel the way you feel, and I can't do the opposite. But just to know that you have that understanding, and that he has family values as well. That's extremely important, because not only do I have children, I have grandkids, but you have to understand the nature of family dynamics. Because you keep forgetting that's where you come from at the beginning, and that makes you who you are. So it has, and you see, I haven't said anything about financial status. I really didn't emphasize too much about age, because to be honest with you, those two things come out of all those things that I said. Because even if you're 35 or 36 or 25, and if you have those dynamics, you are mature enough to be with a person who's on that same level. So that's why I don't like to emphasize on age too much, because there could be a very intelligent 37-year-old. There could be a man who already had children, who just really wants to settle down at 38 or 39 or 40. But he has to know what he wants. He has to know that he's willing to do whatever it takes to make a relationship work, and not just be comfortable, and not just say what you want to hear, but really, really in tune with who they are, so they can spill that energy out into you, and that you could be a compatible couple. Mm-hmm. And he has to know how to love, for one, and have passion. So, even though they're at the bottom, but again, trying to look for love in somebody in the beginning, I don't think that love, I think love is in all of us. I just think that when you're with somebody, that's when it brings it out. Everybody don't deserve for you to give everything up, because you'll be depleted. So love, I think, comes last, because it's like after everything at the above is accomplished, you can respect each other enough to actually love each other enough to not do those things. You can't have love first. You can't have love first, because that's an emotional state. Then when you do love first, you're so fogged into that emotion part that you forgot what you're really looking for. You forgot to be loyal. You forgot to be respectful. You know, that's how relationships fall apart. A simple smile and a simple conversation for whatever it is. You could be talking about the lettuce that you had in your hands, or you can talk about, you know what, I really like this store. Like, be realistic. Oh, you know what, I kind of noticed you over there. You know, I just wanted to come over here. Just be real. Like, you know, I really kind of like what I see. You know, I don't like all that like bird calling. Like those type of callings is for animals. I'm not an animal. You know, like that whistling and that, you know, hey shorty and hey this. I don't respond to that stuff. You know, if you don't know my name, but I think we're all raised properly to walk up to somebody and excuse them and ask them for their time, because that's one thing that I think people don't understand is time. Nobody has to give it to you. It has to be earned because you can't get it back. So if I'm spending my time with you, I'm not saying make it worthwhile, but shoot your best shot. But just be respectful, because you, like, again, you don't know that person's culture. You don't know what that person went through. You don't know the trigger words that people have that's been in them, like I said about certain movies, that kind of bothers them. So just be sensitive to the point and just be simple about it. And if you're really interested, say it at the beginning. Don't don't prolong, like, so that person actually knows what, so they can, all that, you know, if a person can look at you, you know, a lot of times a lot of people look at somebody that, you know, they'll judge so quick. Oh, I don't want to talk to this person. You know, today's a bad day or something. But regardless of what the situation is, be realistic about it, because you don't ever want to take somebody's option away. And, you know, and I always say to people, like, if you got too much going on in your life that you can't seem to sort, I don't think that's a perfect time for you to have a relationship. Nobody wants to talk about how to fix your problem in relationships. I think you should at least have a little bit of your problems fixed before you try to start a relationship, because then you have an accomplishment to talk about. You know, give yourself some stories to talk about, accomplish something, but don't just, you know, look at a woman and be like, oh man, welcome to the man, you're fine as hell, you know, whatever the situation is. But, you know, be respectful about it. Like, you know, I was standing over here and I kind of noticed you. It's just, you know, the first question, you know, are you single? Because when you ask a woman or a man that already lets them know that they're looking at you on a whole different level. You know, so, you know, I've had people approach me plenty of times with certain things, but it's a turnoff when they're so like childish about it. You know, those aspects that I'm looking for in a man, you can't actually have them when your approach is wrong. That's why I say when it comes to Asian men, I really truly want to understand how to come up to them, like what's their approach, because I know sometimes they don't just meet like that. Like, you know, they usually be friends first, and they always develop that kind of thing before you know, just straight head on, you know. But, you know, just be open, be a little bit open, you know, let them know what it is that you got going on. And at that moment, it's, you gotta make that first impression. It's like anybody you meet, it's got to be almost like a slight interview, because you don't have the second chance of making the first impression, because you don't know what that person on the opposite side, what they're going through or what they got going on. And you just want to make sure that you just keep it simple, and then you get to know somebody later. Or, you know, ask somebody like, you know, you seem like a, how about, you know, meeting for coffee or something like that. Can I just have a conversation with you? I'm really interested in to know what type of person you are. Like things like, people don't say that anymore. People don't say that. They just go straight into it. You know, people go straight into it. So, you know, I just think the approach is, if you just honest and just simple,